Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. So today I have another tier list video, and this one is going to be based on the new patch that brought in a lot of changes about a couple weeks ago, that big 1 year anniversary patch that really shook up the meta game and had us all refiguring out the civs and where they all stand in the past couple weeks as well. And this is going to be a tier list based on 1v1 Arabia, and it's going to be based on obviously the highest level kind of gameplay because that's what I know best. But I'm pretty sure some of the results still will apply to lower level gameplay. And I might point out some of the civs that I would recommend for beginners as well, if you guys are interested to know which civ you should learn, if you have no idea which one to pick. So in this tier list, I'm also going to consider that there's been some recent changes, pathing improvements in the past couple months. Arabias have been made more open, and in general, knights are starting to see more and more play. So I'm going to keep those considerations in mind as I go on with this tier list. But without further ado, let's hop into it. I'm actually going to delete the F row to start. And the reason I'm deleting the F row is because I don't think there's any civ that's actually like F tier right now. I don't think there's that big a gap between the civs. I think 5 will do it. B being mid tier, A being pretty strong, and S being the top picks for sure. And then C being playable, but just not as powerful. And then D being probably the worst 1v1 civs in the game. So without further ado, let's hop into it here. And our first civ will be the Aztecs. And Aztecs is an interesting one. It's one I've always placed on S tier in the past tier lists. But they actually just retook a nerf, and they lost part of their eco bonus. It's been like from +5 gather rates, extra gather rate for villagers to +3, and that's been a huge nerf to the eco bonus. So I'm gonna actually put them on A tier only. And this is the first time I'm putting Aztecs in A tier in any one of my tier lists, I think. And this because Aztecs have been generally a civ that were top tier because of their massively strong eco bonus. That +5 gather rate was just huge for their farmers especially, but also across the board for their economy. Now that that's been nerfed a little bit, or quite significantly, it really drops them down a tier because Aztecs are, they don't have the best military out there. They really were a civ that just powered through the ages and through the attacks fast in your opponent because it's the eco bonus. Now that they lost the eco bonus, they're now a little bit weaker in terms of how much they can pump out of their eagle pike combination castle age. They'll probably get a generally weaker imperial age time, and they still have good options. Like their monks are still amazing, their late game is still great with more relic gold, skirm pike, trash war that's really good, eagles mixed in. But really I think that their transitions will hurt a little bit more, and the amount they can pump out, the amount of units and villagers they can pump out will be hurt because of this nerf. So I think they're still probably top 10 civ in Arabia, but not that kind of dominant S tier that we've been seeing them at. Eco bonuses are very important. Losing a big chunk of that is not the best for Aztecs. Also, I will be mentioning a lot of new changes to the patch. If you guys are yet to see the patch, I'm going to go ahead and link my video below where I talked about the patch about a couple weeks ago, and I'll also link the patch in the description below if you guys want to take a look at the big changes that happened in that big 1 year anniversary patch, so you guys aren't lost. But I'll be mentioning them in the video as well, at least the ones I remember. So next up we have Berbers. Berbers are an interesting one. So the thing about Berbers is that they have a really nice tech tree. Like they have good skirmishers, really great cav, great unique unit in the camel archer. They're just lacking that big eco bonus to kind of give them a power boost and keep them on par with other civs. But the one thing that they do have is they have the cheaper cav, both camels, knights, and light cav in castle age and imperial age, which makes them actually very powerful in their cavalry play. So I'm gonna put Berbers at B tier, because they have a lot of great options and they have a lot of good power spikes, but they're just a little bit slow to get going. So if, for example, they got a bonus like, I don't know, let's say they got the Lithuanian bonus, so they start with an extra 150 food, I think Berbers can easily spike to A tier, simply because, that propels them out of the early game. But now Berbers, like I said, a little bit slow to get going, but their mid and late game is fantastic, and B tier is definitely great for them. Britons is another civ that I once had at S tier, but I'm going to put them at A tier for now, simply because now that Cav civilizations are seeing more and more play, Britons have some weaknesses, and those are starting to shine more and more, because Cav Skirm is a great combination to take out Britons in Castle Age, or at least slow them down. And while Britons are still an amazing civ with their boom and their units, if the map is very open and they have to play with a lot of military and say Castle Age, they don't have time to drop town centers, they kind of miss out on their eco bonus of those cheaper town centers, and they kind of get caught in playing with no thumb ring and no bloodline. So their castle age army, besides the extra range on the crossbow, is actually kind of weak if it's an all-in castle age. So Britons definitely have some weaknesses, but still a very strong overall civilization. A tier, and they were not changed in the recent patch. Bulgarians is a civ that got changed in a recent patch, and they're going to be placed at the B tier. Now, so the changes for Bulgarians are that their blacksmith upgrades now cost 50% less food, which is great in the early feudal age. So that's a huge boost at early feudal age, and they also get their siege workshop upgrades are 50% less expensive as well. Bulgarians might even be A tier actually, but I'm going to put them at B tier. I'm going to take the a little bit conservative route. If you put them A tier and you have arguments, I can totally respect that. I'm choosing B tier just because I feel like they're still awkward to play, and lacking bomber cannon late game, as well as +4 armor on skirmishers, could make you a little bit dicey versus our blessed bomber cannon kind of civs. But you have amazing hussars, if not like the best hussars in the game, maybe one of the best hussars in the game with that stirrup technology. Between them and Tatars and Mongols, I suppose, up there. And then you have, great tech tree in terms of skirmishers, and then great cav overall, and great siege now as well. And all these options have been made easier to get to because of their 2 bonuses that were recently added. So amazing stuff for the Bulgarians right there. Next up, we have the Burmese. Burmese are going to be a nice B tier civilization as well. They're a little bit awkward in terms of what they can and can't do. Because, for example, they don't have the archer armor. They don't have the second archer armor. So skirmishers are a little bit of a dicey option for Burmese. But they have a very powerful unique unit, the Arambai, which can flat out win you some matchups. Like even Burmese versus Franks, for example. Burmese can win that matchup because they have Arambai. Now, I'm not saying that Burmese are favored. I'm just saying that it's there's a chance to win it with the Burmese in that matchup because of their unique unit. And then they also have a lot of great infantry options, getting the extra +3 attack in Imperial Age, and obviously scales 1 per age, giving you a great mana arm rush and giving you great infantry options long term. So I'm actually a huge fan of Burmese in terms of a mid-tier civilization. But again, they are awkward in the sense that they don't have a great archery range and could be susceptible to a lot of archer civs as well. So definitely B tier, some good matchups, some bad matchups, and a decent variety of options as well. And you have great hussars with their unique tech. Hussars can actually do a lot of damage to buildings, so you can actually take out castles with the Burmese hussar, which is very interesting. It's not only the Arambai that get the tech, it's all cavalry. They get the bonus damage versus buildings using the unique tech. Next up, we have Byzantines, and Byzantine are going to be another B tier civilization. And the reason Byzantine is B tier is because they actually have really nice options. Skirmishers counter archer civs, pike and camel can counter cav civs, and they have a great late game overall. Byzantine is really a jack of all trades, and honestly, you can make an argument to A tier. In fact, I'm thinking about it. I do think Byzantine could have some bad matchups in some sense, and might have some problems against the really, really aggressive civilizations. Let's say something like Vikings with amazing eco bonus, or like Mallions who have great tech tree and great eco bonus. Byzantine can kind of struggle with that, but in my opinion, Byzantine is a really, really well-rounded civ and has great bonuses that all synergize well with each other. And this civ was unchanged in this particular patch, but they recently got a buff through the cataphract, so Byzantine might be B, might be A tier as well. I'm going to leave it at B for the time being. Next up, also B tier, was the Celts. Celts is a great civilization that recently took a small nerf. The militia now don't move faster in Dark Age, so that bonus kicks in Feudal Age. That was the change in the recent patch. But the Celts are still a fantastic civilization because they have a great eco bonus. Faster wood chopping is one of the best eco bonuses in the game, simply because there's so much wood on the map and it kicks in from the very start of the game in Dark Age. So it gives you an eco bonus from the start of the game all the way to the end of the game, which is just fantastic. And then as far as their options go, it's a little bit awkward to play because you don't have amazing range and you don't have an amazing stable, but you have amazing infantry and siege. So Celts are definitely a harder side to play, but if played correctly, they can actually be very powerful. And I have to mention it, but Huang Rush, the going all in Castle Age, you go fast castle into Pike, Scorpion, Mangonel, maybe some Rams, and a couple of Knights, and you try to all in your opponent, is a very dangerous strategy, and one that has to be respected. So in general, Celts, awkward to play, but in the right hands can be very powerful, and their eco bonus is fantastic. Chinese is going to bring us our first S tier civ. In my opinion, I don't think there's any question about it right now. Chinese were completely untouched in the last patch, and they were already S tier beforehand. Now with Aztecs dropping out of S tier, Chinese might just be the best 1v1 Arabia civ. We'll have to wait and see what other civs come into S tier, but for now, Chinese, it's the bread and butter of 1v1 Arabia. Great early game, great mid game, and great late game. You have so many different options. You're not an archer civ, you're not a cav civ, and you're not an infantry civ, but you have all of those options available, as well as a great eco bonus that saves you resources on technology, as well as starting with extra villagers as well, making the start hard to master, but once you have mastered it, it becomes very powerful. No question in my mind, Chinese definitely S tier. Brings us right along to Cumans here. Humans, I'm going to put them at B tier. Now, humans might as well be A tier because I think their 2TC boom is actually ridiculously strong. If you're not playing, if you're playing solely to win, like it's a tournament situation, you go for 2TC boom, you know, you get your walls up, whatever you need to do to defend yourself in the feudal age, and then you go to castle age with a Vil lead, and then you have knights or Kipchaks that are both very strong options available to you. I think humans could be A tier. However, they did take a small nerf to the Kipchaks, now have a little bit of a fire delay. So Kipchaks are not as powerful as they once were, so I think that might make them a little bit more vulnerable to siege and skirmishers. So for that reason, I'm leaving humans at the B tier. And now humans are also awkward to play. They're not easy to play. The 2TC is definitely very unique. But again, if you use them to their good, to how they're supposed to be played, and and you do the 2TC boom, or you at least bluff it and go for a scout rush or something, humans can actually be very powerful. Not on par with the A and S tier civs mostly, but definitely very strong in their own right. And yeah, with the recent nerf to Kipchaks, I think they settle in at B tier. Next we have Ethiopians, and Ethiopians is a very, very nice archer civ. Gonna place it at B tier just because I feel like it's a little bit too focused on the archers. Lacking bloodlines makes it like you cannot really afford to go that much, that heavy into cav in the mid game in terms of castle age. But you're still able to mix in some knights for sure, like a couple knights with your archer army. No big deal. It's definitely a solid composition. But in general, Ethiopians are just a smooth civ. You get an eco bonus in the early game that's staggers throughout the game. And you also get faster firing archers, giving you a powerful unit. And the late game tech tree is wide open. You have Shotel warriors to counter some sort of eagles that recently got a cost decrease in the last patch, so that's not bad. And then they also have halberdiers that are amazing versus cav, siege that are amazing versus other civs, and just pushing in general. And then your very strong Arbalest as your main units is just amazing. And overall, the biggest weakness for Ethiopians is their cavalry is lacking in the tech tree, but you do get hussars, so in theory you can still spam some very weak hussars in the late game if you so wish to. Next up you have Franks, and I think Franks is one of the best civs to play if you're a beginner. By the way, highly recommend you pick them up, and they're going to see an S tier position as well. Now, Franks is a weird one because I think that they have some bad matchups in some cases, but in other cases they're just so strong in what they do well that you can almost just get away with doing such crazy pressure while having such a good eco behind it. So like Franks is maybe one of the weaker S tier civs, but I think definitely S tier because they get 2 early game eco bonuses, they get amazing options throughout the game, they get very powerful scout rush, cheaper castles to control the game, and then one of the best paladins in the game as well in the late game. So although paladins aren't amazing for 1v1, just how fast Franks can get ahead makes them usable in a lot of cases, and going for the 2 gold unit composition, throwing axeman plus paladin can be very strong. And also Franks aren't necessarily a one-trick cav civ either. They have great options in terms of their infantry and in terms of their unique unit, the throwing axeman, which is also an infantry, and they also have gunpowder, bomber cannon, hand cannon. So really Franks are very flexible. And going crossroads with them in the mid game is not terrible either. You have a good eco bonus to make your boom very, very smooth, and then you switch to cav later. So Franks are simply very versatile and very strong in a lot of cases. So definitely S tier there for me. Could be A tier. I wouldn't. There's some arguments to make them A tier, but I think that overall they have more good matchups than they do bad matchups. Definitely deserve the S tier. Next up on my list will be the Goths, and the Goths are actually going to be the first C tier civilization. They recently got nerfed. Their early loom is now not free. It researches instantly, which is actually like 2 seconds. Come on, Microsoft, you scam me, man. It's not instant. But it takes like 2 seconds to research loom, which is still a good bonus overall. And Goths still have a decent early game, but they remain just a one-trick infantry civilization. And again, they have some other options. I don't want to completely label them as one trick because they have some gunpowder options. They also have bloodlines on their knights, so knights can be decent in the mid game. And they have a decent archer in as well. Skirms late game can be really good as well. But I think just the fact that you have to go infantry with them at some point in the game makes them too predictable, in my opinion. I still think they're a great civ for lower levels, though, because Goth spam is hard to deal with. Huskroll Halb or Huskroll Champion is a very strong composition. It's easy to get to. So I do think it's a good civ to pick up if you're a beginner and you like the infantry. But the higher level you go, the weaker the civ becomes, and the more bad matchups it has. Like, for example, Goths versus Byzantine. you almost have no counter to Cataphract besides Heavy Scorpion, and that's just a very awkward unit in 1v1 in general. And the Goth Eco bonus is not the best in general as well. So Goth, definitely C tier, still playable, still some good matchups, like for example Goth vs Mayans. Goths can win that very easily, but they have a lot of bad matchups as well. Next up, that's Goth. Next up, we're going to have the Huns, and Huns are going to be placed on, just looking at my tier list here, on the side, they're going to be placed in A tier. Now, Huns being A tier is actually, I had to decide between B and A tier, but I decided A tier in the end because they're actually very strong in terms of their cavalry options, and now that the Arabia is more open, I do feel like Huns can can play very, very nicely with the scout rush in the early game. They have a good eco bonus, and they have a really nice late game with heavy cavalry archer plus hussar, and their unique unit, the Tarkin, is just an incredibly strong option as well. So definitely Huns deserve their A tier spot. I will say they're a little bit awkward in the sense that you don't have houses to wall up your map now, so you might have to play open, or you might have to rely on extra palisade walls, which could be a downside, especially since palisade walls take longer to build after the last patch. However, like I said, Huns is just a very smooth civilization, and they're kind of the bread and butter of 1v1 Arabia in terms of their mobile options and in terms of their smooth transitions as well. Next up, oh, sorry if you can hear that, my brother, I think he died in a game on the background. And now we have the next step is Incas. Incas will go straight to B tier. For multiple reasons, they're just a jack of all trades. They have a wide variety of options. Obviously, since they're a not mesociv, but they have eagles. I noticed your comments, YouTube. I know you correct me every time I call Inca mesociv. But they have eagle warriors, and they don't have cavalry, obviously. So they're a little bit hindered by that, but in other senses, they actually have a lot of good options. So slingers to counter infantry, arbalest skirm from the range, eagle halb, Kamyuk as another counter to massed infantry or massed cavalry, and they have decent siege as well, passable siege, siege ram, onager. I believe they have siege engineer as well. So Inca's quite a jack of all trades kind of civilization, and they have a really smooth early game. They get an extra llama for free, and they get their houses actually have +5 population per house, so you don't need as many houses in early game, and you make your farms faster. So Inca early game is actually kind of strong with all those 3 little bonuses piling up. And yeah, like I said, very open tech tree in the late game. So solid B tier civ. Next up we have Indians, which are actually going to be my first D tier civ. Unfortunately, the change that came to Indians just made them overall weaker. Like, you only buff their light cav and castlage. That's the only buff that they did. In late game, they're actually, their light cav or their hussar and their camels are actually weaker than other civs. Well, no, their camels are still strong, but they're weaker than Indians' camel before. But even their hussar now becomes weaker than other hussar in late game. That's really, really weird, in my opinion. Like, I understand the change wanted to hit Indian in a team game, but it actually negatively impacted them in 1v1. And they already were a weak 1v1 civ. They already were a civ that didn't have the most options, but now that we even took away or nerfed their cavalry options, it made them a little bit weaker as well. So definitely D tier for the Indians, in my opinion. Yeah, I don't think they're the worst civ in 1v1. I think there's one weaker, but Indians is definitely bottom 3 at this point. Next up is going to be Italians, and I put Italians at C tier. They weren't changed, but in general, I put them in C tier last time, or D tier, whatever it was, the second before last, or sorry, the before last tier in the last video that I made on 1v1 Arabia. In this video, it's going to be the same story. They were unchanged, and they're simply a decent civ. They have some good matchups, and overall pretty good tech tree, but they don't have anything crazy that really puts them ahead of other civilizations, and they're mostly a water civ, so all their bonuses goes towards that. Next up, we have the Japanese, and Japanese are actually an interesting one. You could make an argument for Japanese going to A tier, by the way. I'm going to personally put them to B tier, but I honestly think they could easily be A tier as well. The reason I'm putting Japanese in B tier is just because I feel like they're, once again, like Incas, very strong overall. Great early game, very strong overall. The late game, however, is a little bit weak in the sense that you're missing +4 armor on your light cav. You don't have a star, obviously, so your rating is not the best. But you have really good halb and skirmishers, and you have really good towers, so you can play some kind of control build with Japanese, but also missing bombard cannons can make you susceptible to onagers as well. So Japanese late game, not amazing, not that great, but not bad either. So I think it's the late game that really puts them to B tier instead of A tier, but the early game is really smooth, and their mid game is very solid as well, and they have some really nice infantry options as well that keeps them pretty high in my list. Next up, we have the Khmer, and that's going to go straight to A tier here. Khmer used to be, I would say, S tier civilization for 1v1 Arabia, especially now that Arabia's been more open, but they recently took a hit to their farming. Farming now is 5% slower than a generic civ. On paper, they gather 5% slower, but they obviously don't need a drop site, so the Khmer bonus is still strong, but it's just slightly weaker than the Khmer beforehand. And they also did a pretty big nerf to the elephants. It was an indirect nerf, obviously. Oh no, it was a direct nerf, sorry. Yeah, it was the direct nerf to the elephants. The Khmer elephants now move, I think, 10% faster instead of 15%. So now I believe they can't chase crossbowmen. I could be wrong. Someone in the chat can correct me. But I believe they cannot chase crossbowmen and catch up to them. And that was a big deal for Khmer elephants before. You can actually catch up to crossbows. And now if you can't do it, it makes the crossbows actually, or makes elephants actually weaker to crossbows, and that's a big deal. Khmer are still powerful. Like, elephants are still decent in the early game, early Castle Age, and in the super late Castle Age as well. But they also have really good cavalry, like Hussar and Cavalier spam that can be super solid. And they also have the Scorpions with an extra range, giving them very versatile options in the mid game. And yeah, I think they settled pretty much at A tier here for sure. Next up, we have Koreans, and that's a civ that used to be quite low on my list, but it's actually not going to be B tier. It's going to be A tier. Koreans in A tier. I was kind of fooling you guys a little bit there with my mouse, but Koreans definitely A tier because the recent changes to the Goths made the civ very powerful. So they lost some of their tower bonuses. They don't get an extra range in castle and an imp for their towers. They made that instead into unique tech. So in Imperial Age, you still have the best towers in the game. You just need to research a unique tech for it, which also made it so you can get that extra 2 range in Castle Age now. So potentially, if you get that unique tech in Castle Age, the tower rush can be even stronger than it once was before. And they also made you get free archer armor upon reaching every age. That is a huge bonus. And in my opinion, Koreans are now an anti-archer civ. They do very well against archers because you can go one-range skirmishers and instantly have armor in both feudal, castle, and Imperial Age. And obviously you'll make more ranges in Imperial Age, but start of Castle Age, you can go Drush FC with one-range skirmishers and have +2 armor right from the get-go on skirmishers, which is just such a massive bonus. Probably one of the only civs that can pull off a Drush FC skirmisher. And then their boom behind it is not, not bad. They have cheaper wood units, and then they also get a really nice late game as well with their war wagons coming into play. Halberdier, they have Hussar, but they're very weak, so I don't suggest using them. But then they have Halberdier, war wagon, and then a great amount of siege that can be played in as well. And then Arbalest skirmisher is obviously fully upgraded. So Koreans, I think that's definitely A tier for me. Next up we have, and they're not bad against cav civs, by the way. They can easily play Halb and Boom and stuff like that, but not the best against cav civs. Or yeah, not the best against cav civs. Next we have Lithuanians, which is also going to go to A tier. I do think Lithuanians are slightly overrated in King of the Desert. Now, while they are very strong in a lot of cases, their eco bonus definitely falls off in Castle Age. It's only 150 food for the early game. Falls off in Castle Age, and if you don't get your relics, your Castle Age options aren't the strongest. You're still really good with fast skirmishers and fully upgraded knights. But if you don't get relics, you don't have an eco bonus, so you're not going to be able to pump out the strongest units, and obviously you're not going to be able to pump them up as much as, say, a civ like Frank. So Lithuanians' Castle Age is actually kind of weak. It reminds me a bit of Mongols, how they fall off a bit. But their late game is very strong, having fully upgraded Hussar, and having potentially Cavalier, Latus, or Paladin with extra attack, and then having faster moving trash that has extra pierce armor via Skirmisher Skirmisher Halb via unique tech. So Lithuanians, really good overall. But not quite S tier in my opinion, just because they're not as powerful as the S tier civs in terms of eco bonus and momentum. The Lightus did take a change. They lost 1 pierce armor, so Lightus are actually not the best unit to go for now in the late game. They're situationally still really good, don't get me wrong. They're still amazing in situation when you're going up against melee units, but now you might want to prioritize Paladin if you're playing against archer units, because now Lightus should get shredded by Arbalest and Heavy Cav Archer in late game. All right, next up we have the Maggots, and that's going to go straight to B tier. A lot of people think Maggots need a change, and and they're not seeing enough play. But in my opinion, I think Maggots are actually quite decent now. With the more open Arabia, it makes them 19 or 20 pop scout rush actually very strong. And their late game is still amazing. They have, I think, the best Heavy Cav Archer in the game, and they have Maggot Hussar, which is probably the best trash unit in the game actually for 1v1 Arabia. So their late game has potentially the highest ceiling. on open maps, and their mid game is not too bad as well. You can go cav archers, you can go knights, and you still have fully upgraded arbalest as an option as well. And you have halberdier, missing the last infantry armor tax, sure, but halberdier are still strong. And so Magyars tend to be very versatile in the late game and very strong in the early game. Again, they fall off a little bit in Castle Age, but they still are not a bad civilization, especially if you get a good punch in the early game. So definitely mid tier. They don't keep up as much with the A tier civilizations, but they if they get to late game, they can be very powerful. Next up we have the Malay, and that's gonna be, honestly, I'm debating between A tier and B tier, but it just makes more sense to put them in B tier because they have a lot of weaknesses. They have a slow start, and their late game isn't the best. They don't have the most options in terms of raiding units, but they do have cheap elephants, which are very powerful. They get, they advance through the ages faster, which gives them extra villagers if you are able to delay and not die. And then they have really good archery range and bomber cannon available as well. So Malay, overall, a solid B tier civilization, and I quite like them. I'm actually a huge fan of Malay for me, and that's why I put them in B tier. Although I will say they're a little bit harder to play. Also, for beginners, I suggest Magyars, by the way. Magyars are very easy to play, and very straightforward, and their late game is amazing. So you'll be able to have a really good success if the game goes long, which it tends to do, I think, at beginner level especially. So I'm just fidgeting a little bit in my seat here. Just going to try to get a little bit more comfortable. My floor is freezing. But anyway, Hera, let's move on here. We got Mallions, and that's going to go straight to A tier. The Mallions are really versatile. They're a jack of all traits, but they're a little bit awkward to play because their options aren't as straightforward. Like, for example, you can play great crossbows in Castle Age. You have full upgrades, but then in Imperial Age, you're lacking Bracer. Another option is like, you can go Cavalier, but then you don't have Paladin. You need to instead get Farimba attack from the castle. So it's a little bit more awkward. And then again, you have Champions, but you're missing Blast Furnace, but you have extra Pierce Armor on them. So you're using Champions as like now a tank unit instead of a strong but squishy unit. So Mallions are overall like very, very versatile, but not super straightforward to play. I think they're still A tier though because their eco bonus is, they have two eco bonuses actually that are both amazing, and they actually recently got a small buff to the Gebero, so the Gebero might be a little bit more versatile or usable in the mid to late game as well. So definitely an added bonus to Mallions. Next up we have the Mayans, which is going to be another S tier civilization. I think Mayans are really, really strong. Now with the wall nerf, they actually become better than other civs because they have cheaper walls, so you can afford to wall earlier, which is really good. Your opponent might not get the walls up as fast as you can. And also Mayans have notoriously been always good with their boom plus archer play. You make a couple ranges, archers, and then you also boom behind it. And then in the late game, you have Halberdier and Eagles that become massively strong options. And then their Plumed Archer. I don't suggest that you go straight into Plumed Archer in Castle Age. I think that's really weak because Plumed Archer is now quite expensive. But if you go Plumed Archer in the late game, that can actually be very, very powerful. And it's one of the hardest units to deal with, hardest archer units to deal with in the late game, simply because it doesn't have any direct counters. It even fares pretty well against skirmishers. So yeah, I think Plumed Archer definitely, or I think Mayans, sorry, definitely deserve the S tier spot because they don't really have any clear weaknesses, and their only bad matchups are other S tier civs, and not even bad. It just becomes skillful matchups. Maybe some A tier civs, but again, it just becomes skill matchups, and then Goths. So they have like maybe 5 or 10 bad matchups total. So I wouldn't say they're the best S tier civ. I think that's Chinese, but I think Mayans definitely S tier. Next up, we have the Mongols, which is going to go straight to A tier for me. You can make an argument that Mongols are B tier, actually. But I just think that Maggots are so strong that they kind of deserve to be A tier. They have a lot of bad matchups, though. So I'm thinking maybe B tier for Mongols. Yeah, they have a lot of bad matchups, but then they also have a lot of good matchups as well, because Maggots are so strong. So it's weird. It's honestly weird. I'm going to put them in A tier, though, just because I feel like more often than not, you can make Mongols work. They're very aggressive in the early game with their extra hunt bonus. Their laming potential is great because you have the extra scouting. So in tournaments, they become alive in the Dark Age. And then the late game is just one of the best in the game. Maggots, Hussars with extra HP, Siege Onagers, Siege Ram that move faster, Heavy Scorpions that can move faster. They're so powerful, especially if you pick up some relics and you can go into the siege options. Man, Mongols are hard to deal with in late game. So I'd say Mongols might be the only civ that's stronger than Magyars in late game, but actually Magyars might even be still stronger in 1v1. But anyways, definitely Mongols up there in the late game for sure. And they definitely deserve their spot in A tier, maybe B tier, but let's see. A tier just because Maggots are OP. Persians, gonna go either B or C tier. Now, the reason I play them as C tier or B tier, and the reason I don't think that Persians are that good in 1v1 is because their eco bonus is hard to use. They have faster moving or faster working town centers, but in feudal age it's great. You just get a couple extra villagers over your opponent, like 1 or 2 throughout feudal age, but probably just like 1 extra villager. And in castle age though, it becomes a lot harder because sure you can go 2 TCs, but then since your TCs work faster, you have to invest more food onto villagers, so you have less food for your military. And your extra villagers only start to work later in the game. It's not an early game bonus. So it's just a really, really weird eco bonus for 1v1. It's great in team game and it's great in water maps. In 1v1 Arabia, it's harder to use. And it often ends in you sacrificing a lot of your economy as well. So I think for that reason, I might actually just put Persians in C tier. They're also not the most flexible civ. I mean, they have really good options in terms of their cav, but you know, not having bracer, you have the trash bows, but even trash bows kind of die to Hussar, and you have Haub and bombard cannon, so you have some good options for late game. But I just feel like they get usually outpaced by other civs, and they die to Halberdier quite hard. The trash bows, in my opinion, don't cut it most of the time, because you don't have enough wood at early stage of the game to really pump out the trash bows. So, you know, I think the Persians can be good. They can be B tier, but they have some weaknesses that I think would make them C tier, in my opinion. I'm still debating, but yeah, I think C tier makes sense, honestly. Because they have, I'd say they have kind of bad matchups versus a lot of these B tier civs. So that makes me think that they're a C tier civ. Next up, we have Portuguese. All right, and finally, I can justify putting the civ in mid tier for me. I don't think it's quite A tier yet. I do think it's a mid tier civ now. I haven't tested that much with the bonus. Maybe Viper has more input on this, but the bonus seems like it's pretty solid. It gives them power spikes at different points of the game. Portuguese already have a wide open tech tree, so just being able to tech into those options faster is a pretty big bonus. Also, wheelbarrow researching faster is basically like a free villager in feudal age, which is a really good bonus. And then in general, their gold discount, which got buffed recently in a couple patches ago, now at 20%, is actually quite nice. Like their cavalier spam can be real, Arbalest are a bit cheaper, and monks are very, very much cheaper. So Portuguese, I think if they fix their gunpowder, organs feel really lackluster. But if they've kind of fixed how organs function, I think Portuguese can be massively strong. But for now, I'd say definitely mid-tier civ. Great options, and they can get to them and get those power spikes as well. And the 30% bonus really allows you to get the right power spikes, right? Because if you get +2 armor on your cav faster than your opponent, you can, you know, take a good fight and win the game. If you get crossbow and bodkin like 5 or 10 seconds before your opponents, you can take a good fight and win the game. So at high level, this bonus actually becomes very, very powerful and could dictate the game in certain cases. Next up, we have Sarasons, and I'm gonna honestly put this civ in A tier. Like the Saracen rush is just so hard to deal with. Like basically, you have a really strong market that lets you propel your early game to like either a good boom or to an all-in push. And then you have really good crossbows that can break buildings. So not only do you get faster crossbows than your opponent because of the market, you can also break their walls instantly and then completely destroy them. So in my opinion, Saracens are a completely terribly balanced civilization. They're not overpowered, don't get me wrong. They're not overpowered. They're just terribly balanced in the sense that their all-in push is too strong, 100%. It's too strong. It's a lot of civs can't deal with it simply and will die to it. And the only reason Saracens isn't S tier is just because the S tier civs have eco bonus that are much more stable, so they don't run out like the market does. So they're a little bit more stable into the mid game, whereas Saracens, the market makes them kind of go all in. All in the sense that you have to invest all your economy into the market, and you go all in like very little villagers, or you use your market to get up to castle age, and then your eco bonus isn't that much better than other generic civs, because then you just it lets you get a faster boom and balance your eco a little bit more, but it doesn't let you get like extra resources compared to something like Chinese who have more villagers, if you know what I mean. If that makes any sense. But Saracens, their Saracen rush is really strong. You go basically fast castle, Drush FC with a market, and then you go crossbows like 2-3 ranges and completely obliterate your opponent. It's super hard to deal with. And you don't even have to go FC, you can even go fast feudal age, 1 range, few archers, and then go second range later after your market, and then go, you know, faster castle age like that. You hit it around 17-18 minutes, and it becomes just really hard to deal with as well. So next up we have the Slavs. That's going to be going to the A tier as well. Slavs kind of remind me of Franks in the sense that they have a really good eco bonus in terms of their farms, and they have really good cavalry options. Unfortunately though, unlike the Franks, they don't have a double eco bonus in that early game, so their eco to the early game isn't as strong as the Franks. But still, you know, once you get to that mid-feudal age and late and early castle age, you can really start to kick it off with Slavs. And their eco bonus for late game is also very strong. They're lacking bracers, so they're one of those awkward civs in the late game, but they have great siege, great infantry, and great cavalry, and Hussar spam with Slavs is very strong. So I think Slavs could have some bad matchups, but they can also have a lot of good options going for them as well. So A tier for sure. Yeah, pretty solid there. Spanish, you suck. This is the worst 1v1 Arabia Civ, I think, in the game at the moment. I'm a little bit, it's a little bit biased because I lost the game yesterday at night with Spanish, and it might just be fresh in my mind that I lost and I felt like they were unplayable. I played against Sarasons, but trying to be as objective as possible. Spanish have not a really good eco bonus. The only thing they save is, okay, they build stuff faster, so they save build time for their villagers, and then they also save the gold for their blacksmith upgrades. But then other than that, they actually have nothing going for them, and they have no special options. The only special option they have is the Conquistador, and Conquistador is actually very weak in this day and age. The Spanish have a ton of bad matchups, and the only good matchups they have is like versus Cav civs like Franks and maybe, I don't know, Franks and Slavs. But even against those civs, you can easily go like Halb Siege Ram with a better eco and completely destroy Spanish. So Spanish just feels incredibly weak right now, and I honestly wish they can do something for the Civ, because the Civ is great in team games, and it's even great in late game 1v1, but not having crossbow makes it very awkward in the early game, and not having anything in Castle Age that makes you a good Civ makes it so you can't even recover from your awkward start with the archers. I honestly think Spanish is just a missionary Civ at this point. You just go missionary rush, and if you don't win the game, you at least entertain your viewers, and as a streamer, that's what you have to go for. So that's, in my opinion, what Spanish is at the moment, but they're very, very tricky to play, and I don't think they can't ever win a game. I think they could still win and still have some decent matchups, but they're not the Civ that can perform consistently. Also, going Tower Rush simply doesn't work at top level play. Towers suck. They got nerfed so much, and it's just so easy to stop. So, Spanish is just too tricky. Some people like Vivi like it, but even Vivi doesn't have that much success with Spanish. Tatars are gonna be either A or S tier, actually. Tatars boom. I was wrong. I'll be the first guy to say I was wrong. I thought the sheep bonus was going to be underwhelming. It's actually freaking overpowered. Their feudal age becomes so smooth with getting those extra 2 sheep. You don't need as much farms, which means you don't need as many people on wood, which means you don't need horse collar, which means you're actually just saving so much in the feudal age, while still having a great economy to do scouts, men at arms, and still follow it up with a great castle age. You can even go Drush FC Expo, and you get 3 thumb ring, the sheep in the feudal age to make your FC time really, really fast, and then you have free thumb ring and castle age to go either cav archers or crossbows. So Tatars are even really smooth there, and then adding in those early TCs and castle age, getting those extra 2 sheep for your town center is actually really strong. Again, because you get the delay farms, making your boom so strong. I do think Tatars are a bit harder to play, but Tatars are now massively, massively overpowered. And also, they even buffed their late game, giving the unique tech, making their unique tech give an extra melee armor to the Hussars and the Cav archers. They gave them a double buff that made them from like mid-tier Civ to actually like S-tier Civ. And like Tatars, I was wrong. They're amazing now, and I would say abuse them while they can, because I think there's for sure going to be a nerf coming to the Tatars. So get out there, play some ranked games. How you want to play them is like I said, either Drush FC or like some sort of feudal pressure with delaying your farms and getting a super fast castle time, and then just playing with a mix of army and economy and castle age. And then late game, you have amazing cav archers and you have amazing hussar. So you just go heavy cav archer hussar with some sort of siege. You're missing bomber cannon, I'm pretty sure, but you still have some other really good options as well. And heavy camo can be pretty decent as well if you're playing as heavy knight civs or help. You have both. Next up, we have Tootins, which is going to go straight to C tier. Tootins have some weaknesses, but they also have some other pretty decent matchups, and they have a good economy overall. So I think Tootins are not a terrible civ to play, just a bit of an awkward one at the high level at least. You have a pretty bad range, but you have really good infantry, pretty good cavalry line, because you're missing light cav, which is really awkward, and you're missing husbandry. So the cav actually becomes very underwhelming for 1v1. Their knight spam in castle age is pretty good though. And what else? They have pretty good siege as well, and bomber cannon, hand cannon as well can be really good for gunpowder with bomber towers too. So Tootins become a very very powerful civ in certain cases, but not very well-rounded. So they have some awkward and some bad matchups as well. But the recent plus extra melee armor on the infantry and cavalry makes them actually very strong in certain situations. So like I said, some good matchups and some bad matchups as well. Next up, we have the Turks that took a massive bonus. I'm debating between A tier and B tier for the Turks. I wrote B tier on my page, but I'm thinking maybe even A tier. The buff to the Hussars was honestly just very strong. Giving an extra pierce armor from the start of the game, I think Turks are going to be A tier, honestly. Just because I feel like their rushes now are just super strong. They have a good option against archer civs with light cav and castle age, and their late game has already been amazing as well. Bomber cannons with extra range, heavy cav archer with extra HP, and full upgrades from the blacksmith, and Hussar with not only fully upgraded but also an extra pierce armor. Turks just feel super hard to deal with in the late game. And they have an eco bonus with faster gathering gold, so they're not like slacking in the eco bonus department either. And they also get free chemistry, so you know what's really good power spec in the Imperial Age. So honestly, I feel as if Turks should be A tier here. Could make an argument for B tier just because they're still awkward in a lot of cases. They don't have pike and they don't have elite skirmishers, but I think they have now options to compensate for that. And the feudal age scout rush with the extra pierce armor can just be super strong in the right hand. So Turks definitely A tier for me. Might be like, I don't like the bonus because I feel like it's too free. You give them so much free stuff for the Turks, so I don't like the bonus. But you know, since it's here, might as well just say it's really good and abuse it basically. Next up, we have the Vietnamese, which are going to go to A tier. Vietnamese are a great archer civ, good eco bonus, really good options, and the thing that Vietnamese have that other archers don't have is actually really good light cav. They have fully upgraded light cav, missing only blast furnace, but that's not a huge deal. And that's really good for raiding. They also have great halbs. They also have Rattan archers, which are amazing in the late game, and they also have a variety of siege with bomber cannon. And their extra HP archers and skirmishers make them very good against other archer civs. So I think Vietnamese kind of remind me of the Koreans in the sense that they have decent eco and also really good anti-archer options as well, as well as having a solid overall late game as well. Oh, I said as well a lot there. Oh man. And the last set, Vikings, is gonna go S tier. Vikings did take a nerf in the last patch, making their chieftain tech more expensive. I don't think it matters though. I think that's not what makes Vikings strong. What makes Vikings strong is the fact that they have free wheelbarrow and free handcart, which makes them so powerful in that mid game. Just letting them get a massive boom. The Drush FC is insanely powerful as well. They have only one downside, which is that their cavalry options aren't the best. But even with that said, their Berserker unique unit is really good for late game as well. So going like simply archers into Arbalest into Berserk and Imperial Age is just massively powerful. Not overpowered. Like, I think some parts of Vikings are overpowered. Like, free handcart is pretty OP in some cases. But now with the chieftain nerf, it makes them a little bit weaker versus cav civs like Franks. So I think Franks could still play pretty well versus Vikings these days, maybe Slavs as well. But Vikings overall just super powerful with their eco bonus, and just getting a faster imp with Arbalest can make you dominate a lot of the cav civs regardless. So Vikings definitely S tier because of their eco. A bit harder to play. Actually, they're easy to play for noobs, but not beginners. Like lower level players, I say noobs, sorry about that. Lower level players, I should say, and even intermediate players can abuse Vikings because you just end the game faster than your opponent because you have more resources. But beginners shouldn't play Vikings because you tend to take too long to finish games, and Viking late game is not that good. And they're kind of susceptible to onagers in a lot of cases as well. Oh man, that was a lot of talking, but this was a very nice tier list video. I'm closing in at 43 minutes. If you guys stayed to this point in the video, thank you so much. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about my opinions and my tier list, and if you enjoyed watching it as well, just let me know. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well if you haven't already. I'm pretty sure we're very close to 50k subscribers. I want to try to get that before the end of the year. We have a month to do it. I don't think it's going to happen, but if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and maybe we'll make the 50k dream alive. And yeah, that's going to be pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.